Join us at Glossy's Beauty and Wellness Summit from November 11th through 13th in Napa, California. Influential beauty and wellness leaders will meet to discuss strategies and pain points, discover innovative tech, and ultimately make valuable business connections through one-on-ones and casual networking. For a limited time, we're offering $200 off with promo code GBS24, no spaces. Again, that's GBS24 with no spaces. Go to glossy.co/beauty summit for more information and to secure your pass today.
Hello and welcome to the Glossy Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of fashion with the industry's most influential voices. I'm your host for today, Zafir Zviglinska, the international reporter for Glossy. Today, we have an incredible guest joining us, Birmingham-born Clare Waight Keller, the newly appointed creative director of Japanese mass brand Uniqlo that has gone from strength to strength. Claire has had an illustrious career, having led design at iconic fashion houses like Givenchy and Chloé. Now she's bringing her vision to one of the world's most beloved brands, as well as helming menswear. We'll talk about her creative journey, architecture, Japan, and what excites her about designing for Uniqlo, as well as how she plans to shape the future of this global brand. Hi, Claire.
Hello, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Obviously, we've got quite a few questions to get through, all about the kind of creative direction and Uniqlo. So I'd love to get into that a little bit. So in terms of your first creative director role at, a mass retail brand like Uniqlo, tell me a little bit about, how that came to be, because obviously previously you were designing for Uniqlo C, and now this is kind of expanding to also include menswear.
It is. So I started actually a few years ago. A really close friend of mine lives in Tokyo, contacted me over COVID and said, Uniqlo is interested to talk to you. Would you want to talk to them? And so I said, yeah, I love that brand. I've bought Jill Sanders collaborations for years, and I've got so many basics from the brand. I knew it quite well, and I was really curious about it. I love Japan, love Tokyo. So that was a draw already. And then when they called and said, look, we'd like you to start thinking about a collaboration collection, and really coming from a more feminine point of view. I think they were starting to, Jill was leaving and they were starting to wrap up the collections from her. And I think they really felt that having a woman's point of view is important in the mix. And so it was a really interesting starting point for me, because the brand has got such amazing technology and innovation that coming in and doing a capsule and being from a luxury industry background, to sort of marry those two things together, sort of my luxury knowledge, the innovation that they have, seemed like a super exciting mix.
Yeah, of course. And on that kind of luxury experience note, how does it differ, designing for Uniqlo versus designing for some of the luxury houses that you've been at, like Chloé and Givenchy?
It actually doesn't differ that much. I start out the process exactly the same way. And I think for me, what's been interesting is that the audience is slightly different. It's obviously so much larger, but their knowledge is vast. So I come to it very much from my own process that I've always worked with, which is getting my inspiration together, looking at the street, photography exhibitions, fabric, all these different sources, pull it all together as a concept. And then I sketch it myself. And then we go to Tokyo, I hand it over, and we start to talk about the silhouette and the proportions with the pattern cutters, with the atelier that have there. It's exactly the same process. It's just done at a very different scale. And so I think for me, that was what was really interesting, is that as big as they are, they approach design with real integrity. And so I really appreciated that. And I think the price point may differ, but good design is good design. It doesn't matter what the price is. It's about the quality of the design.
Yeah, of course. And what about timelines? Because obviously with luxury houses, sometimes it's 2 collections, sometimes it's 4 collections a year, sometimes it can be even more. What does that look like with Uniqlo? I mean, at the moment, it's, I would assume, 2 ranges a year. But is that something that, is easier maybe to do than something for a luxury house?
Actually, you're quite right. It is. And Givenchy, if you can believe this, I did 10 collections a year, which is enormous. So I was delivering a collection between every 8 to 10 weeks, which is intense. And that was because we were doing men's, women's couture, then mainline, and then so within the mainline, there was pre-collection and then the seasonal collection. And it was just an enormous amount of sort of creativity that had to come to the table constantly. What's interesting about Uniqlo is because their model is much more about the most beautiful basics, the timeless classics, and then a layer of fashion on top. They build their collection very carefully, and it is just 2 seasons a year. It's spring, summer, autumn, winter. And the fact that they only keep to a limit of around 250 pieces per collection, you're really actually very edited in what you do. So it's much more about finding the perfect example, the perfect thing, and refining the best idea and the best sort of fashion piece for the season, rather than doing 20 or 30 and hoping 10 work. So it's a different process, but equally enjoyable.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, it must be a little bit less pressure as well on that front. And I know that the autumn-winter collection for Uniqlo has just come out. What was the inspiration behind there? You mentioned that, you have inspiration before. I know that architecture sometimes seems to influence you as well. Is that something that influenced you this time as well?
It is. And it's not architecture as, I'm inspired by that window and door and column and things like that. It's actually the way people interact with the architecture. So for me, it's how people love to live in a neighborhood and what they love about it. So it's the feeling of it. It's the kind of characters of people that gravitate towards these neighborhoods that really fascinates me. And I think that's where culture happens, is when you see that this particular area of London has a huge artist community, and then there's a lot of festivals there. And that's what really pulls me from an architectural point of view, or a neighborhood, let's say, because you see something happening that is emerging through the people that live there and the way they live. They have a sense of particular style that becomes really interesting.
Yeah, of course. And how does that end up kind of coming through to the clothes? What kind of practical elements, I guess, do you take from those streets into the collections?
It's often about silhouette, the styling mix. So maybe they'll be wearing something really cropped. Maybe they're wearing something super so oversized. Maybe it's with a really low sneaker. Maybe it has a special kind of, fabric or color that I really like. And so I sort of am looking constantly. And I think the streets offer so much incredible inspiration. And I really think the way fashion goes, it evolves from what's happening on the street, particularly with youth. So when you look at 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, people in their early 20s, it's often when they're experimenting the most with fashion or trying to find their style. So it creates very interesting mixes of things. And I find it really fun to look at it. And it's super inspiring.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Uniqlo's collections are kind of very cross-generational in that sense. There's a lot of pieces that would work for people of very different ages. How do you end up kind of creating these pieces that are very, transitional and kind of, again, like crossing a lot of generational lines?
I think I try not to think about it too much, because as much as young people, very easy to dress because they can look great in anything, but also older people want to look great and young too. So you sort of feel like you want to sort of hit the sweet spot of it being really appealing to a young generation, but equally wearable for someone who's older. And so I think that's really to do with the cut and the silhouette and the fabric. And then it's how you put it together. So obviously a younger person is going to wear it with maybe super low rise pants that are hanging low. And they're going to wear like a really cropped jacket on top. And an older person might wear sort of a beautiful, like maybe even a luxury blazer over that amazing t-shirt, basic t-shirt, and maybe a more tailored pant. So there's so many different ways that people can interpret that. And I think that's Uniqlo's strength, is that they kind of appeal to all.
Yeah, of course. And for you, what's been the most kind of surprising or exciting aspect of designing for a brand like Uniqlo? Something that you didn't really expect going into the process?
I think for me, it's been the amazing access to their fabric suppliers and the innovation that is available. Mm-hmm. So that is something that's very unique to Uniqlo. Obviously, everybody kind of knows about heat tech. I think it's one of the secret industry favorites. I know even so many stylists use it constantly. But also, the Airism and the Puff Tech, the ultralight down. These were all sort of over the last 10, 20 years, innovations that they've done. And so they not only innovate through science, so trying to keep people warm or cooler, but also the performance of the fabric itself. So it's easy care, it lasts a long time, it has a great performance factor in terms of being showerproof or windproof. So these are all things that I think are the unique selling points, really, and what's appealing about the brand in many ways.
Yeah, of course. And it wouldn't be Uniqlo without talking about price point. And I know that, that commercial need is something that's quite unique to, a business like that. How do you manage that creative kind of aspect and those commercial needs?
I think for me, I always push quite far, and then they always tell me when I need to go back, because commercially they will tell you, and it's interesting, you actually sort of make an interesting choice, because you might look at, let's just say a suit. And I'll say, well, I want the fabric to have a bit of a kind of hairy surface, and I'd like it to have this softness. And then they'll come back to me and say, okay, because it's hairy, we have to line the whole thing, including the trousers. And we've wear tested it and it pills at the side. So we don't believe in that. And then the prices come in at this. And then they say to me, would you buy it for that if it, has all these problems and issues? And I'm like, no, you're right. So then we go back and we rework. And so it's kind of a collaboration in that sense of trying to find really the most beautifully executed product that also performs really well and can last a long time. And so there is a compromise of sorts, but it's almost like you're collaborating in that conversation, because you have to put yourselves in the shoes of the customer and realize that, for them, spending a few £100s on a few things, it can be a lot. So They want great value, and they want something that really is well done. And they expect that from Uniqlo as well.
Hi, I'm Jill Manoff, the editor-in-chief at Glossy. For nearly 20 years, I've been covering the beauty and fashion industries. With the landscape evolving so rapidly, especially with innovations like AI, staying informed is more crucial than ever. At Glossy, we pride ourselves on delivering well-researched, premium content vetted by our journalists, who themselves are industry experts. Our goal is to empower you with the knowledge to make strategic, real-time decisions for your team. If you'd like to subscribe to Glossy Plus to support the work we do, you can go to glossy.co/subscribe. Members receive exclusive access to in-depth research and weekly briefings covering what's happening in fashion, luxury, beauty, and wellness, as well as case studies, invites to member-only events, and so much more. Thank you for being part of our community.
And for you, in terms of designing for Uniqlo, there's a lot of things that are driven by trends in mass fashion, but I'd say that your designs are quite timeless. You mentioned obviously quality and durability before. So how do you maintain that kind of design approach while staying relevant to, customers who do typically chase trends?
I think for me, because we're working about a year in advance, so the idea is that we're supposed to be able to kind of capture what's going to happen a year from now. Interestingly, that's a harder job than in luxury, because luxury has about a 6-month turnaround. So they have half the time in which to kind of feel that trend. So I actually have a much more difficult task in that sense. But I think, to your point, timelessness is important. That's what actually brings longevity to clothes. And I think more and more with, the fact that we have so much in the market to choose from, and there are so many brands just churning out products. Uniqlo's philosophy is we make, for women's wear, 200, 250 items per season, and they are the perfect items. And we keep more than, I think, 50% of that is core. So things that really don't change. And that's the part that I think is interesting. They just layer on just the best of what is fashion at the top. So maybe that's through color, maybe that's through fabrication. But I like to think that I try to create pieces that I have in my wardrobe and I've been going back to over the last 10 years and have consistently worn. And so if it's in my wardrobe, then I know that's got longevity in other people's wardrobes too. So the pleated skirt, the super soft blouse, beautiful blue or white shirt, a tailored suit. These are all kind of, staples in the wardrobe. And my other thing that I really, really believe in, each season, I make sure the colors are consistent as well. Like yesterday at the press day, I was wearing a tailored tropical wool pant from last season, from spring summer launch that we did in February. And I wore it with the new dress from this season, which is also it's a super lightweight flannel in the same grey, and I could match the two pieces together from completely different seasons. And I think that's where it becomes clever in terms of design, is that you're not sitting there going, well, that grey doesn't work with that anymore, so I'm going to have to get rid of that and buy something else. Those are the details that I think are the sort of, let's say, the language of Uniqlo that I want to bring in, so that not only is the quality having longevity, but also the pieces can carry season to season and not feel like they're not working together and become dated.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a really interesting approach, kind of bridging those seasons and making it work as a kind of bigger collection almost, especially since, customers do typically buy more than one season's worth of those items. And, on that kind of customer insight front of things, feedback typically, is something that you get with high-end customers where you're working very closely with, your customer there. What about mass brands? Do you end up kind of incorporating that customer insights back into the product that you're designing?
Yes, actually, I have to say Uniqlo is quite extraordinary in that way. They have so much data from their clients. And I think the interesting thing is that they often comment on performance and the fabric and the way it feels, or the length, or details that you might not necessarily pick up. So we wear test and trial everything, but the Japanese customer is very discerning. So they literally look at everything. So we will get on the Japanese website comments saying, I really love this fabric, but it wrinkles a little too much for me. Or they love the color, but they wish there were more pieces in this color. So they do give a lot of feedback, more than Western market. It's really quite interesting. So we do listen to that, and that obviously feeds back, and then we make decisions if it makes sense or not to include in the collection.
Yeah, of course. I do remember that. I think I visited Tokyo a couple of years back, and I was looking for restaurants to try, and I went on Taberogu, which is like the Japanese browsing website for food. And everywhere they literally had 4 or 5 paragraphs for reviews on places, going into so much detail. I'm assuming that with clothes, it's very much the same.
Yes, similar. Yeah, definitely. It's amazing, actually. They really care. They really care about it, and they want their opinion heard. So very, very discerning.
Yeah. And moving on to, I guess, the role of creative director, it's been announced this week that, you are the new creative director at Uniqlo. What will that mean for you in terms of what your role will entail? And I guess, what are you looking for in terms of the direction of the brand?
I think for me, I'm excited about this next part of the journey. I think not only has Uniqlo C been a huge success, which has been super exciting to see, but now being able to implement, in a way, some of the test ideas that I put in Uniqlo C. In fact, it's happened already. There's a few things, like, for instance, the trench coat, which I'm sure you remember from the first season. I've now done it for about 4 seasons. The next season, spring, summer 25, is probably the last season it will be within my collection of Uniqlo C. And the following season, it moves to mainline. And so that's the interesting part, is I'll use Uniqlo C almost as my lab in a way, sort of test the ideas, test new fabrics, make the silhouettes a little bit stronger and more unique. And then based on the success, those then trickle back into mainline. And that means I can advance even further and do even more interesting things in my sort of collaboration collection.
Yeah, of course. And what about menswear? Because obviously that's something that's going to be new for this role as well. Previously, it's been, exclusively women's wear. Is that something that you're excited about? And what are your kind of plans there?
Men's was something that was really sort of bubbling on my list to do. When I joined, I thought, I know they really want to focus on the women's, but from the first collection, the number of men that emailed and said, when's the men's coming? When's the men's coming? And so pretty quickly, we understood that we needed to kind of fulfill that part of the collection as well. So I love menswear, and so much of my own sort of, I guess, stylistic references come from men's. Having, worked at Ralph Lauren and being at Givenchy, those were two big places where I really got deep into menswear. And I think it's always also been a bit of a point of reference, even in women's. I mean, at Chloé, I constantly make that sort of masculine boyfriend reference within my sort of feminine girl. And so it really was exciting to kind of now launch the men's pieces. And I actually just heard yesterday, so we launched the collection in New York yesterday, well, globally actually, I think maybe Japan was a day earlier. And one of the men's pieces was already trending globally top 10, which is amazing because you need to sell like a lot of that stuff to get in the top 10 for Uniqlo.
Yeah.
So the men's just has really hit the spot straight away. From yesterday, they've already got massive sell through. So it's exciting to kind of see that response. And even, from the announcement that came out yesterday, so many people saying, oh my God, I'm going to get even more, menswear to pieces to buy. So I love that kind of feedback. It's great.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to seeing both collections, especially since, I end up kind of poaching both from women's wear and menswear sometimes. It's very, very fun to get that. And in terms of, I guess, the role of the creative director, you've been at some very big houses and now kind of moving to Uniqlo, where that design direction is also needed. What do you think about, I guess, the evolution of the role of the creative director, and where do you see that going?
I think the role of a creative director has changed a lot in the last 10 years. I have to say, it used to be, I can give you the biggest example was when I was at Chloé. That was when Instagram started. So I joined Chloé in 2011. I think maybe Instagram started 2010. And so I saw the evolvement there, because when I started, I did some magazine interviews and I did some newspaper interviews, and obviously the critics, that was it, job done. By the time I was halfway through Chloé, suddenly it was like, no, we need to get on social media, and you need a social media account, and you need this. And suddenly it's like the sort of PR aspect doubled. And over the last 10 years, that's become even more extreme, to the point now where almost I do very little print and I do so much social, and so many things like podcasts and stuff like that are so much more important than they ever were before. And so for me particularly, I think the job has changed enormously, and it's also a lot more pressure. So I feel for younger designers, when I was really cutting my teeth as a creative director, I didn't have eyeballs on me all the time. Now it's like from day one, hit the ground running and everyone's watching you. So it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, it really is. Are you going to be going to any of the shows at New York Fashion Week to kind of help and spur those younger designers on?
Unfortunately, I'm flying out today, but I try and get to some if I can, but I'm not sure I'll be able to, but I'm leaving in a few hours, so.
Okay, no problem. And you mentioned social media, of course, like that's such a big thing. It's something that, you do have your own Instagram account where you post a lot from Uniqlo, but also kind of your personal travels. Is it something that you enjoy, being on social media as a kind of creative director, or is it still quite a challenge, I guess, to get that content out?
I've taken the stance of, I think when I've got something to say, I'll put it out there. Or if I'm really excited about something, a place that I'm visiting or things that I've seen, I'll compile something together. I personally think there's so much information out there. Just to constantly bombard people with my eggs for breakfast and things like this is not really that relevant. And so I'd rather just put a super concise bit of content that I feel really kind of captures what I'm doing at that time, or is like a summary. So I just posted something that was a roundup of like the last 2 months where I've been traveling for, my personal life. And that for me is a really nice way to wrap it all up in one story. Whereas, posting every day, it's a very different thing. And I'm sure it takes a lot of time actually to do all of that type of things. And as effortless as it looks, it's consuming. And so I want to be able to sort of absorb my surroundings and really engross myself in where I am, as well as be able to share it with people. So I try and take a balanced view on that.
Yeah, of course. And pulling it back to Uniqlo and next steps, do you have any goals for the brand and the direction that you want to take it in as creative director? Because obviously, it's a bit of a different role than when you're kind of driving everything yourself.
It's true. For me, I think I really want to push the innovation. I've got so much access to it. I really feel that that's something that I really want to get into. I'm also really implementing and pushing sustainability alongside that. And they already are doing quite a lot, but we want to do even more. And that's an important part of just the future that we need to all address. And so I have a platform to really try and do that in a big way. So I'm, having those conversations. But there are challenges with that too. When you have very high standards of quality, something that is recycled sometimes doesn't have the quality that you need, and it only does last a season or two. So as much as I really want to embrace all of that, I want to make sure that it has longevity to it as well. So that's an important part of what I'm going to do in the next few years, but also just push the fashion. And that's a exciting thing for me, is the platform that I have to be reaching so many people to wear what I'm doing. I mean, that's really thrilling as a designer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that is everything. Thank you so much, Claire, for being on the Glossy podcast. It was lovely to have you.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
And that's all the time that we have this week. Don't forget to give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this. It really helps us out a lot. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Glossy Podcast to hear interviews with industry insiders every Wednesday and week in review episodes every Friday. Thanks for listening.